because you say the love of your life and the father of your child fatally shot just 6 months ago. You have the court's deepest sympathy for the loss of your son. Raymond is not Ms. Santos's child's father, also sleeping with another man during the time her son was conceived. Is because she wants to collect his Social Security and life insurance benefits.
The thing was, it was such a secret because me and Raymond grew up together. We don't have blood in our system. We don't have the same blood running through our systems.
No, you don't have the same blood.
But we did grew up together. That's why it was such a secret. That's why I kept this pregnancy such a secret.
You all were in the same family, grew up together?
No.
Not blood
We were
cousins.
raised as cousins.
You would consider him family if you were out on the street, and that's why, Ms. Cologne, this was...
You know, if he wanted to be with you, you should have told him, no, we're family.
Oh, no, he was so persistent on trying to be with me.
Tell us how you ended up with Mr. Cologne.
Okay,
This case unfolds around grief, doubt, love, and a search for truth after death. It begins with a woman named Sarah Santos, standing in court carrying the weight of loss. The man she loved, Raymond Cologne, was shot and killed just 6 months earlier. He was only 20 years old. Sarah says Raymond was not just the love of her life, but also the father figure to her 4-year-old son, Julius. She has come to court because Raymond's mother refuses to accept that her son could be Julius's biological father. Sarah wants a DNA test, not only to settle the truth, but to protect her child's identity and legacy. Raymond's mother, Miss Cologne, is grieving deeply. She has buried her son and is still raw with pain. To her, this case feels like another wound being opened too soon. She believes Sarah is lying about paternity because Sarah was involved with other men during the time Julius was conceived. She also believes Sarah's motivation is money, specifically Social Security and life insurance benefits connected to Raymond's death. From the start, the courtroom is tense, filled with sorrow, suspicion, and unresolved emotions. Did he father a child before high? Yes. Sarah explains that her relationship with Raymond was complicated and secretive. They grew up together, raised around the same family gatherings, barbecues, holidays, and parties. They were not blood relatives, but they were treated like cousins. Because of this, their romantic involvement felt forbidden, something they both tried to resist. Sarah says Raymond pursued her persistently, and eventually she gave in. It happened during Raymond's birthday celebration, a family party filled with food, music, and alcohol. In a playful moment, he smashed a cupcake into her face, something that had always been part of their family traditions. He led her to clean up, kissed her, and despite her hesitation, they ended up sleeping together. At the time, Sarah was already in a relationship with another man and was sexually active with him as well. She admits this openly. She insists that what happened with Raymond was brief, only occurring that one morning. Later, when she discovered she was pregnant, Raymond himself asked her if the baby could be his. Sarah says she immediately denied it, both to him and to herself. She was convinced the child belonged to the other man she had been seeing regularly. She says she was in complete denial and told Raymond there was no way the baby could be his. Time passed and Sarah gave birth to Julius in Florida. When Julius was about a year old, she returned to Chicago, hoping the other man would step up and be a father. Instead, he rejected the child entirely and eventually kicked Sarah and Julius out of his home. With nowhere to go, Sarah says Raymond stepped in. He told her he would not let her or the child be homeless. He offered stability, an apartment, and financial support. Sarah says Raymond made it clear that she only needed to take care of the home, and he would handle the rest. They moved in together, and over time, Raymond became a constant presence in Julius's life. Miss Cologne challenges Sarah's version of events. She points out that Sarah lived with yet another man, a friend of Raymond, before moving in with Raymond. She insists that Raymond was never told definitively that Julius was his biological child. In her eyes, Raymond was helping out, being kind, but not claiming paternity. She also argues that if Raymond truly believed Julius was his son, he would have demanded a DNA test, signed the birth certificate, or come to his parents and told them the truth. According to her, none of that happened. Sarah responds with emotion. She says Raymond loved Julius deeply. He played with him, cared for him, and treated him like his own son. Julius called him daddy. Raymond taught him simple joys: baseball, dominoes, strawberry milk. To Sarah, biology aside, Raymond was Julius's father in every way that mattered. She says this case is not about money. It is about giving her son clarity, identity, and an honest understanding of the man who raised him and loved him before his life was cut short. The pain intensifies when Miss Cologne describes her own loss. She explains how Raymond moved out of her home on Mother's Day without warning, a day that already held emotional significance. Later, after his death, she discovered things she never knew about her son, including his plans to marry Sarah. These revelations came too fast, layered on top of her grief. To her, Sarah's claim feels overwhelming, like too much truth arriving at once when she is barely surviving the loss of her child. The courtroom does not empty emotionally after the first result. Instead, the weight of grief seems to linger in the air because this episode is not just one story. It becomes clear that this day is about a pattern, about families torn apart by sudden death and unanswered questions. Another mother now stands in the same courtroom, carrying her own unbearable loss. Her name is Mrs. Watts. She is here on behalf of her deceased son, Alex Stewart, who was murdered only months earlier. Like Miss Cologne, she is a grieving parent trying to protect what little peace she has left. Mrs. Watts explains that she doubts whether Alex is the biological father of a 20-month-old boy named Cadden. The child's mother, Cherelle, insists with certainty that Alex is the father. The pain in Mrs. Watts's voice is evident as she describes the day her life changed forever. She recounts receiving a phone call telling her to come to the scene of a shooting. When she arrived, she learned that both of her sons had been attacked. One died at the scene. Alex was rushed to the hospital but did not survive. She describes holding her son for the last time, unable to accept that he was gone. Now, on top of that loss, she is asked to confront the possibility that there may be a grandchild tied to his name. Cherelle speaks next, explaining her relationship with Alex. She says they were deeply in love, together for years on and off, and planning a future. According to her, whenever people saw Alex, they saw her too. She says Alex embraced Cadden as his son, loved him, bonded with him, and treated him like family from the moment he was able. To her, biology does not matter because Alex never questioned the child's place in his life. She insists that Cadden knew Alex as his father, and that bond was real. However, doubt slowly reveals itself through Cherelle's own words. When asked directly if there is any chance Alex might not be the biological father, she admits that there was a moment of uncertainty. She explains that during a rough period in their relationship, she had a one-night encounter with another man. She says she told Alex about it early on, and when she later discovered she was pregnant, she herself was unsure. A text message she sent to Mrs. Watts is read aloud in court, where she admits she did not know who the father was and believed a DNA test would be necessary. This admission shifts the emotional balance of the room. The judge points out that while love and intention matter deeply, doubt still exists, and truth must be established. Cherelle explains that Alex wanted to keep the pregnancy secret. She says he was a private person and did not like others involved in his business. She also admits she kept the pregnancy from her own family, fearing disappointment and judgment. Alex was not present at Cadden's birth, and his name was not placed on the birth certificate. Instead, Cherelle gave the baby a different last name, saying she did not want to risk making a mistake before knowing the truth. Alex's stepfather testifies next. He explains that he had a close relationship with Alex and that Alex never mentioned having another child on the way. He recalls how Alex openly claimed his daughter from a previous relationship, even going through DNA testing to confirm paternity. That, to him, makes this situation feel different. If Alex had known for sure Cadden was his, he believes Alex would have spoken up in the same way. Cherelle responds with emotion. She says Alex loved Cadden regardless of blood. She shares that Alex took photos with the baby, held him, and behaved like a father in every sense. To her, Alex did not need a test because his heart had already chosen. She says Cadden deserves the chance to know Alex's family, his brothers, and his history. She wants her son to grow up with a sense of belonging, not confusion. Mrs. Watts listens quietly, visibly torn. She admits that she sees resemblance in the child, but she is afraid to let herself believe it. She explains that she has already lost her son once, and she cannot afford to lose him again emotionally by attaching herself to a child who may not be related. She says she needs proof, not because she lacks compassion, but because her heart cannot survive another loss. The judge acknowledges the pain on both sides. She explains that while emotional bonds are powerful, children also have the right to know their biological truth. She stresses that finding the truth now, while the child is still very young, can prevent deeper wounds later in life. The court then explains the process used to obtain the DNA results. Because Alex is deceased, the test is conducted using his mother's DNA to determine whether there is a genetic relationship between her and Cadden. As the results are prepared, the tension in the courtroom rises. Both women brace themselves. For Cherelle, this is a moment that could either confirm everything she believed or shatter the foundation of her child's identity. For Mrs. Watts, it is a moment that could reopen her grief or finally bring clarity. When the results are read, the answer is definitive. There is no biological relationship between Cadden and Mrs. Watts. The percentage of relatedness is almost non-existent. The courtroom falls silent. Cherelle is devastated. Tears fall as she struggles to process what this means. She insists that Alex loved Cadden and believed he was his son. She clings to the memories, the photos, the moments that felt real and meaningful. The judge responds with compassion but firmness. She explains that while Alex may have loved Cadden deeply, the child still deserves to know who his biological father is. Love can exist alongside truth, but truth cannot be ignored. She encourages Cherelle to do the difficult work of finding Cadden's biological father, while the child is still young enough to grow into the truth without confusion or resentment. The court reminds everyone that these stories are not about blame. They are about loss, survival, and the complicated ways people hold on to love after death. Both cases reveal the same painful reality. When someone dies suddenly, they leave behind unanswered questions, emotional bonds, and lives forever changed. Some children grow up with love that was real but not biological. Some families grieve not only the person they lost, but the future they imagined. As the session closes, there is no celebration, no sense of victory, only quiet acceptance. The truth has been spoken, even though it hurts. The court encourages healing, honesty, and compassion moving forward. These children were loved, even if blood did not bind them. And while DNA can define biology, it cannot erase the memories of care, protection, and presence that shaped their earliest years. The courtroom slowly empties, but the emotions do not fade with the closing words of the judge. What remains is a heavy silence, the kind that settles after truth has finally been spoken, but healing has not yet begun. In both cases, the answers brought clarity, but they also left behind aching spaces where hope once lived. These were not stories about lies told with cruelty, but about people clinging to love in the aftermath of sudden death. For Sarah, the truth meant accepting that the man who raised her son was not his biological father. Even so, she holds on to the belief that love shaped her child more than blood ever could. Julius grew up believing Raymond was his father. He was held, guided, protected, and loved by a man who chose him every single day. Sarah understands now that she cannot give her son Raymond's last name or his bloodline, but she can give him the truth without erasing the love that came before it. She knows that one day Julius will ask questions, and when that day comes, she will tell him about a man who stepped into his life when he did not have to, and stayed until he no longer could. For Miss Cologne, the results finally give her permission to grieve without doubt. For months, she carried anger alongside her pain, unsure if another child carried her son's blood. Now she can mourn Raymond fully, without suspicion or resentment clouding her memories. She still acknowledges that Raymond acted as a father to Julius, and that bond mattered. But knowing the truth allows her to place that chapter where it belongs, as part of Raymond's generous heart rather than unfinished responsibility. Her grief is still raw, but now it is no longer tangled with unanswered questions. In the second case, Cherelle leaves the courtroom shattered but not empty-handed. She loses the biological connection she hoped would anchor her son's future, yet she keeps the memories of a man who loved her child openly and without hesitation. Alex may not have been Cadden's biological father, but he held him, played with him, smiled with him, and treated him as his own. Those moments were real. They mattered. No test can erase the fact that, for a time, Cadden knew safety and affection through Alex's presence. Mrs. Watts, too, walks away changed. She no longer has to fear another loss layered on top of her son's death. The test protects her heart, but it also leaves her reflecting on how love can exist without biology. She sees clearly now that Alex gave something meaningful to a child who was not his by blood. That realization softens her grief in an unexpected way. It reminds her that her son was capable of deep love, responsibility, and care, even in a life that ended far too soon. The judge's final words echo long after the session ends. She reminds everyone that biology creates connection, but love creates meaning. Children deserve truth, but they also deserve compassion in how that truth is revealed. Both Julius and Cadden are still young. They have time to grow into their stories, to understand that the men they called father were not defined solely by DNA, but by presence, care, and sacrifice. These cases expose how fragile certainty becomes after death. When someone is gone, memories turn into evidence, emotions become arguments, and love is put on trial alongside science. The courtroom becomes a place where grief speaks just as loudly as facts. Every tear, every raised voice, every moment of silence tells the same story. People are trying to hold on to what they lost while searching for something solid to stand on. In the end, no one truly wins, but no one leaves without truth. The answers allow these families to move forward, not without pain, but without doubt. The children at the center of these cases will grow up knowing that they were loved fiercely, even if the truth came later than anyone hoped, and that love, though complicated, will always be part of who they are. The courtroom doors close behind them and life continues. Grief remains, but so does honesty. Love remains even when biology does not. And in that balance between truth and memory, these families begin the slow process of healing, carrying forward not just the pain of loss, but the lessons of love that came with it. A new voice enters the courtroom when Raymond's sister takes the stand. She says she believes Julius is her nephew. She testifies that Raymond told her directly that he had gotten Sarah pregnant. She admits her mother struggles to believe this because she cannot accept that Raymond would cross such a strong family boundary. Still, the sister stands firm, saying Raymond loved Julius and acted like his father in private, even if he never confronted the family openly. The court listens carefully as the judge acknowledges the complexity of the situation. This is not just a legal question, but an emotional one. A young child believed a man was his father. A mother lost her partner. A grandmother lost her son. The judge reminds everyone that biology creates a father, but love creates a daddy. Still, the truth must be known. When the DNA results are finally read, the courtroom falls silent. The test determines that Raymond Cologne is not the biological father of Julius. The news shatters expectations. Miss Cologne breaks down, overwhelmed but also seeking closure. Sarah is visibly shaken, but she speaks with gratitude. She says her son was still raised by a good man, and that love cannot be erased by a test result. The judge gently encourages Miss Cologne to grieve properly now, without doubt weighing on her heart. She also urges her to consider keeping a place in her heart for Julius, a child who was shaped by Raymond's love. Miss Cologne, through tears, says that if Sarah ever returns to Chicago, she would be willing to see the child, to teach him manners, and to honor the bond that once existed. The case closes with a painful but honest truth. There is no biological connection, but there is a story of love, care, and loss that will always exist. Julius may not carry Raymond's blood, but he carries the imprint of a man who loved him fully, even in a life that ended far too soon. This case unfolds around grief, doubt, love, and a search for truth after death. It begins with a woman named Sarah Santos, standing in court carrying the weight of loss. The man she loved, Raymond Cologne, was shot and killed just 6 months earlier. He was only 20 years old. Sarah says Raymond was not just the love of her life, but also the father figure to her 4-year-old son, Julius. She has come to court because Raymond's mother refuses to accept that her son could be Julius's biological father. Sarah wants a DNA test, not only to settle the truth, but to protect her child's identity and legacy. Raymond's mother, Miss Cologne, is grieving deeply. She has buried her son and is still raw with pain. To her, this case feels like another wound being opened too soon. She believes Sarah is lying about paternity because Sarah was involved with other men during the time Julius was conceived. She also believes Sarah's motivation is money, specifically Social Security and life insurance benefits connected to Raymond's death. From the start, the courtroom is tense, filled with sorrow, suspicion, and unresolved emotions. Did he father a child before high? Yes. Sarah explains that her relationship with Raymond was complicated and secretive. They grew up together, raised around the same family gatherings, barbecues, holidays, and parties. They were not blood relatives, but they were treated like cousins. Because of this, their romantic involvement felt forbidden, something they both tried to resist. Sarah says Raymond pursued her persistently, and eventually she gave in. It happened during Raymond's birthday celebration, a family party filled with food, music, and alcohol. In a playful moment, he smashed a cupcake into her face, something that had always been part of their family traditions. He led her to clean up, kissed her, and despite her hesitation, they ended up sleeping together. At the time, Sarah was already in a relationship with another man and was sexually active with him as well. She admits this openly. She insists that what happened with Raymond was brief, only occurring that one morning. Later, when she discovered she was pregnant, Raymond himself asked her if the baby could be his. Sarah says she immediately denied it, both to him and to herself. She was convinced the child belonged to the other man she had been seeing regularly. She says she was in complete denial and told Raymond there was no way the baby could be his. Time passed and Sarah gave birth to Julius in Florida. When Julius was about a year old, she returned to Chicago, hoping the other man would step up and be a father. Instead, he rejected the child entirely and eventually kicked Sarah and Julius out of his home. With nowhere to go, Sarah says Raymond stepped in. He told her he would not let her or the child be homeless. He offered stability, an apartment, and financial support. Sarah says Raymond made it clear that she only needed to take care of the home, and he would handle the rest. They moved in together, and over time, Raymond became a constant presence in Julius's life. Miss Cologne challenges Sarah's version of events. She points out that Sarah lived with yet another man, a friend of Raymond, before moving in with Raymond. She insists that Raymond was never told